It'll be whatever Discord comes up with. Honestly, I'm not going to say what the party makeup will be because it'll be whatever Discord wants it to be. It could be a solo party with just one guy. It could be all white mages. It could be all fighters, and we'd have a really easy time, you know. So I mean, it's whatever. It is a you guys choose the party run. If that gets met, if it doesn't, if the goals don't get met, we'll just move on. We've got so many games on the list already; it's not that big a deal. We have 2 other community goals going right now, which is adding more games to the list. So Final Fantasy Legend 1, 2, and 3, and Final Fantasy Adventure, by name, sound like they're Final Fantasy games, but I assure you that they are not. They're actually Final Fantasy Legend 1, 2, and 3 are the original Saga games, like Unlimited Saga, Romancing Saga, that series. The Saga series started with Final Fantasy Legend. That's just what they called it when they brought it to America because they thought it would sell better if they put Final Fantasy on the title, even though it wasn't a Final Fantasy game. And they did the same thing with Final Fantasy Adventure. Final Fantasy Adventure is actually Second Densetsu 1, also known as Secret of Mana 1. It's the original Secret of Mana. Secret of Mana on the Super Nintendo is actually Second Densetsu 2. And in recent years, they've remade Final Fantasy Adventure and given it an actual Mana title. But when it originally came out, it was called Final Fantasy Adventure. So we've added community goals that, because some people expressed interest in me playing those, and I'm like, you know, they're not really Final Fantasy games, but if you guys want to, I will. Spend your bananas to show me you want me to, because like that's gonna be like an undertaking to play these. Like they're somewhat obscure games, and I think they're like Game Boy games too, and they're a little rougher around the edges than like the mainline Final Fantasy games are, you know. So, anyways, I feel like the Saga series is sort of like where Square goes to like try out crazy ideas. Like whenever they get like a weird off-the-wall mechanic and they're like, I don't think that's gonna work in Final Fantasy, they'll be like, well, let's put it in Saga. Saga has some weird mechanics in their games sometimes. You're saving your nanners for tomorrow. Oh no. Do I need to get the monkey hat out tomorrow? Is that what's happening? Desshire made me put the monkey hat back on the list. A lot of people are like, what? The monkey hat's gone. The monkey hat's back. When we get to Final Fantasy 7, we are going to put that mod as the community goal. So there is that, what was the name of it? There's a Final Fantasy 7 mod that's like a complete overhaul to the game. And so that'll be our community goal for Final Fantasy 7, which will be to play the game a second time with this overhaul mod. Should be fun. Yeah. And for all of the games, for the original playthrough, like the one that isn't going to take a community goal to get going, we are just going to, like I said, try and 100% it. Basically, all bosses is what I'm saying. Is like the blanket 100%. Like, at the very least, we will try and do all the bosses. Some of the games we may add to that. Like, for instance, Final Fantasy 7. I mean, all bosses, sure, but I want to get all the summons. So that means, like, to get Knights of the Round, we're gonna have to get a gold chocobo, which means we're gonna have to do the chocobo breeding. Like, I want to get all of the limit breaks, which means that we're gonna have to get Eris's limit break before too late. It means that we're gonna have to, like, do the gold saucer, you know. So I mean, like, there's gonna be other things than all bosses, but like all bosses is like the baseline for us doing 100%. And all bosses can be a lot more daunting in some games than others. Like, some of the farther you go in Final Fantasy, the more you get like the ultimate secret ultimate, you know, optional bosses that start showing up. There's not as many of them in the old ones, but in the newer ones, more prevalent. And by newer, I just mean like after Super Nintendo, really? Alright, so this room here is the end of the first half of this dungeon. We're at the top of Mirage Tower. We're going to use the warp cube to get up to the flying fortress where the air crystal resides, guarded by the evil air fiend Tiamat. That fortress is only like, what, like 4 levels? 5 levels? It might be 5. I think it might be 5. One of those levels is just like a straight shot walk, so I mean, it feels almost like 3, honestly. But on the final level, on the approach to Tiamat, there is a like 1 in 32 or 1 in 64 maybe chance of us running into War Mech or Death Machine, depending on the version of the game you're playing, which is a like super hard random enemy that can just show up and wreck your face. So maybe we'll run into War Mech, maybe we won't, we'll see. I'll just cross our fingers and see what happens, I guess. Also, I believe that there is another ribbon up here, right? Or is that in the Chaos Shrine? I think it's here. You like how stupidly broken they made Waka in the remaster? Did they rebalance stuff in the remaster? How much Blitzball am I gonna do in X? Well, I'm gonna answer that easily. More than I want to. We're gonna get Waka's ultimate weapon, which means we're gonna have to play like minimum like 30 Blitzball games. I think if you really work the system, you can do it in like 20 something Blitzball games. I don't know. It's gonna be a bunch. Blitzball is a dumb game. I'm sorry. It's when you first start out, your guys are super weak, and if you work at it, your guys can get super strong. But honestly, you don't even need your guys to get strong because you can just use Jack Shot to knock in a goal and then just play keep away and go swim somewhere where they'll leave you alone and just wait out the clock. Like, it's not a super fun game, but it is a game that we will play. Hey, it's Evil Eye. They changed his attack reels to be multi-hit instead of only counting as 1 hit. That is nice. Whoa. That is a nice upgrade. Considering that what we're gonna be trying to do, that's gonna be super helpful. We might need stuff like that because all bosses means that we're gonna have to be fighting like dark penance or whatever, like all the dark aeons and penance and all that. So those are some hard fights. You know, honestly, for the newer Final Fantasies, something I might consider, and I'm not going to commit to this because I haven't looked into what this really entails yet, but for the newer Final Fantasies that have them, we might just try and get like the platinum trophy or whatever, right? Like do all the achievements. That might be our 100% for those ones. And when it comes to Final Fantasy X, I mean, there's some exceptions. Like if there's gonna be something like Final Fantasy IX in the jump roping game, I can't beat that. I've never been able to get 100 in jump roping, no matter how much I've tried. And I love Final Fantasy IX. Yeah, see, in Final Fantasy X, filling the sphere grid, that I don't know if it's worth it, right? You don't need to fill the sphere grid to do all the bosses and everything. Like, if it's just like super grindy boringness, we're not gonna do it, you know? So, yeah, we probably can't do a complete platinum without just like making it a monotonous drone for some things. Because sometimes they make achievements that are dumb. There are some games we can do the platinum for though. Like Final Fantasy VII we can get the platinum for. It has a platinum and it's totally doable. Like, You have to get Cloud fully dressed up, which I do anyways. I think for one of the achievements, you have to get your date at Gold Saucer to be with Barrett. That just is picking the right options. You got to fight all those secret bosses. We're gonna do that anyways. You got to get all the summons. We're gonna do that anyways. So we're pretty much, if I get the date with Barrett, we're pretty much gonna be getting the platinum for Final Fantasy VII anyways. All right. Yeah, I don't want to do stuff like trying to fill the entire sphere grid. That'll probably just be annoying. So we're not going to commit to the platinum, but we'll definitely try and do as much completion as we can do, and it still be fun. That's what I'm going to say. We're going to do the maximum amount of completion that we can do and still be enjoying ourselves. I don't think filling the sphere grid, I will be enjoying myself. Ooh, protect ring. Can you wear a protect ring? Yes, you can. It guards against instant death, though. I should put it on someone that doesn't have. I should put it on someone that doesn't have a ribbon yet. But you're probably gonna be the last one to have a ribbon. Is there anything important, worthwhile from playing the card game in 9? I mean, not like 8. In 8, you can like just destroy the whole game and all of its mechanics with the card game. In 9, I mean, you can try and get all the cards. You can do. There's a tournament, but it's not like hard to win. Not really that I know of. I don't know all the secrets in 9, even though it's my favorite and I've beat it several times. I've never done everything in 9, so there are some things I still haven't done in 9. Like the big optional boss at the very end, I've actually never beaten him, so that'll be a first when we get there. I typically enjoy just playing 9 and having fun and beating the story, you know? I don't usually do everything, but I'm trying to be a little more completionist this time. I used to know 9 so very, very, very well because back when I was a kid, I didn't have a PlayStation 1, right? I had a N64 and a GameCube, but I didn't have a PlayStation 1. When PlayStation 2 came out, I saved up my money and I bought myself a PlayStation 2. Well, I saved up my money to buy one, and then my grandfather was like, don't spend your money, use it on something else, and he bought me a PlayStation 2. It's actually what happened, but I saved up my money to do it, and anyways. The reason that's important is because of the mistake he made. My grandfather got me a PlayStation 2, and I bought myself a copy of Final Fantasy IX. My grandfather didn't buy me a memory card to go with my PlayStation 2. So I couldn't save the game. So I tried for months in high school to beat Final Fantasy IX without a memory card. Which, keeping in mind, I couldn't turn the system off. And like, I live with my grandparents, and my grandfather was like super big on like, don't waste electricity. So I used to like drape like a shirt or some papers or something over the PlayStation so they couldn't tell it was still on. They wouldn't see the red light, right? But I'd try and leave it on while I was in school or sleeping so that I could keep the game going, because if you turn the game off, I'd have to start all over. And if I died, I'd have to start all over. So I may not know every nook and cranny of Final Fantasy IX, but I know the first disc incredibly well because I've played it over and over and over again, slowly learning the game without a memory card. I did eventually get a memory card, but I went a long time without one. That's one of the reasons I like Final Fantasy IX so much, probably. I didn't actually own a copy of 7 back then. My cousin had 7 and I played it at his house. And that was actually my first Final Fantasy. And I remember I had a story about that one too. He had the old pop-up top PlayStation 1, you know, where like you hit the button and the top pops open and you pull out the disc, right? We were playing Final Fantasy 7 for the first time. We'd never played it before. And we finished Midgar and we went to the next town, Calm or something, I don't remember. The town right outside of Midgar, where you stop and everybody's like, okay, who's this Sephiroth guy, Cloud? You gotta tell us. And you have the big, like, this big sequence where you recount the story of revisiting your town and Sephiroth coming to town and to Nibelheim, like the whole Nibelheim flashback, right? Which takes like 30 minutes, 45 minutes. It was my first time playing, I don't remember. It took a while, right? You can't save during that part because you don't go to the world map. So we got near the end of it and we hadn't saved since we beat Midgar. But we saved right after we beat Midgar. That was the last time we had saved, right? And then his cat walked across the top of the PlayStation 2, and when it stepped on that top loader, it reset the system. So we had to do that part again. Yeah. Which, you know, I mean, it was cool. We got to see the cutscene with Sephiroth and the flames twice. That was good, I guess. That was a badass cutscene when it first came out, you know? Ooh, Dark Cloud 1. See, I've played just enough of Dark Cloud 1 to know what it's like, but I've never really played Dark Cloud 1 much. It looks like a game I would enjoy. Dark Cloud 2 is the same way. I've played like up until the part where you leave and you get to the forest on the train or whatever in Dark Cloud 2, but I haven't really gone farther than that. I just played enough to get like a taste of the game, right? And I definitely would like those games. We've got to play them on the stream sometime whenever we're done with Final Fantasy, right? Yeah, Final Fantasy VII had amazing graphics when it came out. I feel like even when it came out, those polygons looked kind of jank. Like those are like the like there's like 17 polygons per character or something. Like they're just so very blocky and like they had such beautiful like hand-drawn like backdrops for all the levels and everything, and then you have these like weird 3D they would have been so much better with sprites, you know, or like 3D modeling a character and then making sprites out of it or something. Like there's so many other methods that people have come up with, and Square definitely could have done. But man, those cutscenes though, like when Final Fantasy VII came out, that was the game that made people first start thinking, oh, Square makes the really good cutscenes, the really good FMVs, right? And they became like known for that. And Final Fantasy 7, 8, 9 all have all kinds of really great cutscenes, and I mean, obviously they've gone forward with that, with their production values on their cutscenes and everything. Other people have kind of caught up at this point, though, right? But for a while, like, I mean, like the cutscenes in Final Fantasy 7 were like above and beyond like any other game I had at that time. There's another ribbon. Alright, so we got 3 ribbons. 3 ribbons is the most ribbons that you will get in the main game. But like I said, I'm pretty sure Hellfire Chasm will give us a 4th one so everyone can have a ribbon when we get around to doing Hellfire Chasm again. Final Fantasy 13 was mostly cutscenes with the occasional pressing of X. I feel like 13... I'm gonna just go ahead and say 13 is not my favorite Final Fantasy by any stretch of the imagination. It's not even in my top 5, but I feel like it gets a worse rap than it deserves. It has some very big issues, but there are worse Final Fantasies, you know? The first one you didn't bother finishing? I could see that. Final Fantasy 13 was the first Final Fantasy where I felt like Square was going in the wrong direction. The white robe and the black robe. I don't think we can even wear those, can we? Yeah. Like, Final Fantasy 12, I wasn't a huge fan of the combat system and the way the party members just kind of did their own thing and you used the gambits to control them. But I was okay with it. Final Fantasy 13 was the first time they put out a Final Fantasy and I was like, no, dude, no. What are we doing? What happened to Final Fantasy, you know? I still think it's an okay game. I hate the combat system. I do. It's like, you're not really... Like, if you mash auto, which you don't have to mash auto, but the game kind of like seems built around you mashing auto. Like, I think the idea they had was like you wouldn't be choosing the individual actions. You don't choose the tactics that your party performs. You choose like the strategy they perform over top of it by switching their classes on them or something. But I didn't like it. They went back in the other direction with 13.2 though, right? But then the problem with 13.2 is like, where did you go with the story? Like, this is the same game. It like 13.2 doesn't feel like the same kind of story as 13.1, you know? Oh yeah, we want that. You can't play 13.2. 13.2 has a much better, a much more traditional combat system than 13. It still has similar veins to 13.1, but it has a much more traditional combat system. And then 13.3 or Lightning Returns, you're just lightning. That's a very different kind of thing. And there's my biggest issue, I have like anxiety playing Lightning Returns because of the timer. And I know the timer is like super lenient and not really a thing and more of a plot contrivance and that you can totally slow it down or whatever. But like having a timer on the entire game just gives me like completionist nightmares. Like, I don't know. I get like, what is this timer and why is it ticking down? Am I gonna run out of time? What's going on? You know, I freak out a little bit, and I probably shouldn't, but I do. You know. Yeah. Anyways, we'll get to those when we get to them. We're gonna beat all of them, so. And if we have to play through them multiple times to do everything, we'll do that. You know, like with 13, with Lightning Returns, if I can't do what I want to do in one playthrough because of the time limit, I think you can just like New Game Plus it or something. So. And I gave up on Final Fantasy after 13. Yeah, like I said, like 13 is when they kind of like lost their way, or they decided to go off in some other way, right? 13 is when Final Fantasy went the way of like the new Star Wars trilogy, where it's like, okay, I see that you're trying to do Star Wars, but like, that's not, what are you, don't, just don't. Like, yeah. Square Enix really gotten away from what you loved about JRPGs. Yeah, me too. And like now they're trying to make their JRPGs action RPGs, right? Like they're trying to get away from the turn-based even more. I mean, they've always had like action time battle or whatever, right? Action turn battle or whatever, but like they're trying to make them action games and more along like the veins of like a souped up Kingdom Hearts or something, right? With like Final Fantasy 15 and Final Fantasy 7 Remake. They're like refining this action-based combat system, and I don't like it. I don't have anything against an action-based combat system. I have something against this particular action-based. Like, I don't think they're doing a good job of it. Like, if you're gonna make Final Fantasy be an action RPG, then like actually make an action RPG, you know? And like, I saw the trailer for Final Fantasy 16 and I was like, yay, new Final Fantasy! And then I saw the images and I was like, that looks awesome! And then I saw the combat system and I was like, shit, it looks like 15 again. You know, like, why can't you just let Final Fantasy be Final Fantasy? You certainly let Dragon Quest be Dragon Quest. Dragon Quest doesn't change at all, right? Like, it's like polar opposites. Like, Dragon Quest is like stuck in the past to a certain extent, where it was like Final Fantasy wants to try and, I mean, and they've always tried to reinvent themselves, but they're trying to like change genres now, you know? Or they're trying to like invent a new genre or something. I don't know what they're doing. And everyone liked Final Fantasy the way it was, you know? I will say that the trailer looked really promising, and there was very, very little of the combat in the trailer, so I can't really judge it. All I can say is that I'm disheartened by the fact that it looked like 15, because I don't like 15's combat system. But maybe it'll be good, you know? You don't know. By the time we get through all these Final Fantasy games, it'll be out. So we'll play it, you know? And we'll see. I like 7 Remake's combat system. Okay, I think I like Kingdom Hearts games, right? I do. I really do like Kingdom Hearts games. I don't think they have the best combat system. I think like Sora is like super floaty, and it's not the best combat system. I like Kingdom Hearts for being Kingdom Hearts, right? And I feel like Final Fantasy 7 Remake is like a really good Kingdom Hearts combat system. It doesn't feel floaty like Kingdom Hearts does. Your party members aren't as stupid as Donald about what they're doing. It's like a really well-refined Kingdom Hearts style combat system. It's like they're kind of like melding that into something better. And I like that, but it's still not what I'm looking for. You know what I mean? It's not quite there. It's the best of that style of combat system I've ever seen. I will say that. Yeah, honestly, I play Kingdom Hearts for the story too. Which I have some friends that look at me like I'm weird when I say that. They're like, Kingdom Hearts has the most batshit story. I'm like, yeah, and I'm in it. But I wish the Kingdom Hearts though had like more Final Fantasy, right? Like the original Kingdom Hearts, the idea was that it was like Disney characters and Final Fantasy characters coming together, and like Final Fantasy characters in Disney World. It was a Final Fantasy Disney crossover or something, right? And like they very quickly just kind of like pushed that down. It's gone from like we had a bit of Final Fantasy in there to we get some cameos to Final Fantasy 3 had like no I mean Kingdom Hearts 3 had like no Final Fantasy characters in it basically. The only Final Fantasy characters in it were the Kingdom Hearts characters, which I guess you could consider Final Fantasy-ish adjacent characters. But like like it went from like and we always get Disney worlds. Why couldn't we have a Final Fantasy world, you know? The only Final Fantasy world we get is like what, Hollow Bastion? Is that supposed to be a Final Fantasy world? Like why can't we have like you know, some Disney characters in a in like Final Fantasy VI's world or something. That would be cool, you know. But they try very, very hard to just make it like a Disney game that happens to have Final Fantasy trappings or something.